In this video, I'm going to show you how to use a JSON file like this one to store information about a site, including the selectors for the data that you want. So at the end of the script that we're going to write together, you can just give it the URLs for the specific products that you want. And as long as you've done the store config in here, it will match it and it will give you that information. So we're going to build this together. Let's get started. So this basically revolves around importing in this JSON data, sorting through it, reaching out to the page and getting the information back. So I'm going to make this full screen and we're going to import in a few things that we need. So I'm going to be using HTTPX. This is my go-to at the moment. Feel free to use requests if you like. I'm also going to use Selectolax. I find this to be the best HTML parser that I've seen. So I'm going to use this one. You can use whichever one you like. Use Beautiful Soup if you want. We're also going to import in JSON because we'll need that for when we work with that JSON file that I just showed you. And I'm also going to import rich print. So from rich, import print. This is not a mandatory step. This is just so it prints out neatly in the terminal when I run the code. So as we're going to be importing data from this JSON file, we're going to set up some data classes, which I failed to import. So we will do that now. From data classes, we'll import data class. So we're going to create two data classes, one that's going to take this information and then one that's going to hold the data for the product information that is returned back to us. So let's have our first one. So at data class, this is going to be class store. So this one's going to have a name, which is a string. It's going to have the URL, which is also a string. It's going to have the title selector, which is a string, and also the price selector, which is a string. So this information just is exactly this. So if you had more selectors because you wanted more information, description, availability, sizes, you could just add them in here and add them in here. So we're going to load from here into this. Now we're going to have our data class for the item itself. So class item. Now within this, I'm going to say, well, let's have the store information come with the item as well. So we'll say store, and this is going to relate to the store data class that we just created. Then we're going to have the title, which is going to be a string, and then the price, which is also going to be a string. I usually always leave the price as a string and then sort it out afterwards, depending on what you want to do with it. Rather than converting it as it comes in, I tend to do that when I clean the data at the end. It's up to you. So let's get this JSON file imported into our code. So let's have a load stores function, and this one will have with open, and it is stores.json, and it's going to be as read data is equal to JSON dot load, because this is coming from a file rather than a string, so JSON.load rather than load s. And now we want to return this out as a list of dictionaries. So we just want to convert this JSON object into a list of dictionaries, but we want to have it in our data class, so we just need to make sure that we do that. Store, and then we'll unpack our item, which we're going to, I'm not going to call this item actually, we'll call this item should be fine actually, for item in data. And now we can have our main function, which will just construct for the moment, so we can see as we build everything up. Then we'll have our, let's just have our stores is equal to load stores. Oh gosh, like so. And then we'll do, we'll just print out the stores so we know that this is working at the moment. And we'll have our if name is equal to dunder main. So we run this nice and neatly within our main function there. So let's run. Okay, the names don't match up, so I'm just going to change it here for the moment, save changing all of the actual JSON, and this should be working fine. There we go. So now you can see that we have the store information, and the issue I had there was these name fields, these keys didn't match the actual JSON key, so you need to make sure that they do. And once I fixed this to this, it worked fine. Okay, so now that we are loading the stores up and we can see that working, we want to finish creating the rest of our actual scraper. So this is going to be fairly straightforward if you've done any web scraping before. If not, just follow along. I always have a load page function, and this takes in a HTTP client. So this is going to be like a session. HTTPX calls them clients, request calls them sessions. That's going to hold all of the information for us. You should always be using a session. So then we're going to pass in a URL, which we're going to determine as we go through the ones that we're going to give it. So then we can say our response is going to be equal to client.get the URL, and then we can do return HTML parser for response dot text. So this is going to load the page up, and it's going to give us back this HTML object that we can then query. And speaking of querying it, we're going to have a parse function, and we'll just call this one parse. And we're going to give it a store. Because we're going to be passing in the actual store information into this data class here, we need to pass it into this function, because we're going to export from this function, we're going to return this data class. So we're also going to need to give it the HTML, which we have created in our load page function. Let's move this to the middle of the screen. So this is basically just going to be return our item, and it's going to be the store is equal to store, which is the store that we're passing in here. So it's a small s because this is this variable. And then the name, which is going to be, what do we call this? Title, rather. Title, which is going to be HTML dot CSS first. And now we're going to give it the selector. So the selector is under this title and price variable here, which is now inside our title and price data class. So we can just do store dot title, and then we want to say the dot text like this. I think we can do strip is equal to true in here. I can't quite remember. There we go. Let's move that down, and then I'm just going to copy this, paste it here, and we'll just replace this with price because it's working exactly the same way. Store dot price like so, and we'll empty that there. So this is basically all we're going to do is just return us our item data class with the item from that page. So what we'll do now is we'll flesh out our main function first, and then I'll show you how we're going to decide how it knows which store, which selectors to use for which store. So we're going to keep our stores, load stores here. Then we'll have some headers. These are always important. I'm going to copy this over from my other, like so. So this is basically just a simple user agent, and this is our HTTPX client. So we can pass this into our other functions with the user agent, which is going to get used for every request that we make. So now we need some URLs. I'm going to move these over here like so. Now with these URLs, we have the complete URL for each of the stores and each of the products. And if you wanted to add in a different product for one of these stores or one of the ones that you configured, you can add them in here. I was tempted to move these off into a separate file as well and import them, but I decided to leave them here. I think it's a bit clearer as to what's going on. So we're planning to just loop through these URLs. We need to write a new function so it knows which selectors to use. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to create a new function called store selector. And this is going to take in the stores list and the URL. So what we're going to do is we're going to do for store in stores. So we're going to loop through each one of the data class for store that we have from this function here. So we're going to have a list of them. We're going to loop through them, and we're going to say if store.url is in URL, we're going to then return the store. So all we're doing is we're comparing the URL that we've created in our JSON configuration to the full product URL. And if one is in the other, we're going to then return that store information out. So this is going to then give us the correct selectors here for our products. So now we can come back down here to our main function. Let's move this to the middle, and we'll say for URL in URLs, we're going to do store is going to be equal to our new store selector function that we've just created, store selector, and we're going to give it the list of stores and the URL. This is going to then return the correct store information, so we can do our HTML is equal to load page with the client and the URL. And then we can say, let's just print out the information that we get, pass on the, what did we say we were going to give it? Store and HTML. So we can then pass the store and the HTML here. So let's run this and fix any errors that we may have found. We didn't find any, so this is good. So now we can see that we've got the first one, which has matched the store with the correct URL and given us the product, and here and here and here too. So let's test this. Let's go and get a different product. Let's just do this one. Grab that URL. Let's close you and let's put it in here. Remove this, make you full screen, save this, run it again, and we should get this product as well now. So let's just go and find that. So here's the first one and here is the second one. So you can see how easily you can configure the stores for the scraping that you need done. You can add in URLs that you may or may want. So maybe you don't want this one anymore. You just remove it from your URLs list. As I said earlier, I would probably put this in a file so you could just run and import all of the file as well. And you then can start to build up a sort of shell scraper that you can reuse whenever you're doing basic HTML scraping like this. If this was a different site where we needed to do JavaScript rendering, we could easily just change our load page function to include Playwright or something like that. So that's it for this video. If you've enjoyed this and you think you've got some value out of it, I think you'll like my Patreon page. There is a free tier. I post weekly blog posts on there, and a paid tier, obviously, if you wish to support me in that way. If that's not your thing, I'd appreciate it if you like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think. And thank you very much for watching. See you next time.